All right, buddy.
Mic check.
That's good, Justin.
Thank you. Then y'all got zoning public hearing. Bigger agenda.
O'clock I got. Hey, it is 6 o'clock. We'll call the September 28th, 2021 meeting of the Administration and Finance Committee to order. Miss Only, if you would call the roll, please.
Malinowski.
Here.
McBride. Present. Joe Walker. Overture Walker.
Present.
Mackey.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next order of business, number 2, approval of the minutes from the regular session, July 27, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any changes, additions, deletions on this from staff? Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, I have a motion and a second to approve. Ms. Only?
Malinowski.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Overture Walker.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Item number 3, approval of the agenda.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Administrator Brown?
No changes, sir.
No changes. Ms. Only?
Malinowski.
Here, yes. You already know I'm here.
Yes.
Overture Walker.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item number 4, items for action. 4A, Treasurer's Office, Federal Forestry Funds, on pages 15 to 21. Administrator Brown.
Yes, sir. If you all may remember, this item came before the council before, or the committee before. We were able to get information from the treasurer's office that this item, the breakdown that was submitted, was just the way that it had been done, but there was no specific requirement to do it that way. So you see that the recommended action is to approve the resolution allocating the funding there, 50% of portion to the public schools, and then the remaining for the construction and improvement of public roads, or you can allocate the 50-50 distribution between, whatever portion you want to do. So it wasn't a specific requirement, and the treasurer's office doesn't have any specific requests of the council. Just do what it is that you want to do with the funding.
Questions, comments?
Mr. Chair, I do believe at our last meeting, I did have just some questions about it, and so I thank staff for bringing that information back, and so I feel good.
Okay.
Chair,
Ms. McBride?
I have a motion.
Okay, motion?
I move, first of all, let me preempt it by saying that everybody knows that I'm a strong advocate for schools, education, and youth. That's primary with me. However, my motion is that we use 100% of the funds for construction and improvement of public roads, and that we do give some priority to roads that are near schools and school communities. And I say this because we are really in dire need of funding for construction, for the infrastructure of constructions and our public roads. And our schools, a large percentage of our taxes go toward our schools, and we always fully fund them. And so in this case, I think that the money would be better used if we take the 100% for public roads and give schools priority in terms of roads near them. Thank you.
You heard the motion. Is there a second?
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
I'll second it for discussion. Go ahead.
All right. And certainly, Ms. McBride, I agree with your position. I guess the question that I would have is, in light of the Supreme Court decision pertaining to Greenville County's road user fee program, and I know that the county is currently in litigation over its road user fee program. Could these funds be placed, I guess, in the road placed in the road user, I guess, fee fund, if you will, or what does that look like in terms of, as far as the way these funds get used? Would they have to go into a particular fund? Could we use them to, I guess, supplement, funds that would ordinarily go into the road, be part of our road user fee program? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
It does, and I'd let, I guess we got two questions. One would be a legal question, the other would be a staff question.
Why are you looking at me? I don't have a legal answer. No, no, seriously, no, I'm working with. But in terms of, could you put it in a fund to use other than the user fee fund? The answer to your question is yes. Could that be supplemented to do work that's normally spent out of that? I would certainly then defer to my legal partner right to the right of me.
There's no issue with using additional funds for road maintenance. So what we want to make sure we do is, as we discussed, kind of put a hold on those funds. So I wouldn't mesh those funds together. Or if you do put in we need an actual breakdown of, this is still here and we're never using it, kind of thing, until we get an answer on the court case. So, but as to how you supplement and all that, it's not really a huge deal.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. McBride.
You're welcome.
And we certainly can identify that these were forestry funds in terms of delineating the funding source. So,
I guess not wanting to commingle, if you will, funds that we're receiving from the state treasurer's office with funds that have been collected and are currently, I guess, in the county's road user.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I would like to add to the Councilwoman McBride's comments that the fact that many schools had been using virtual, not in session. It's my understanding that there's been savings to the point of not having to use some of their budgeting for maintenance and upkeep and utilities like they normally would. So there's some cost savings in there also for those schools.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
may I make an amendment to the motion?
You can ask the maker of the motion if she would accept a friendly amendment.
Will
Sure.
you accept the friendly amendment?
It's friendly.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
friendly. No, I am.
Tell
in-
her what it is.
Okay, I am in favor of, the 100%. However, I would like to see if we have just roads in general that may not be near schools that really are a priority that need to be improved. And if we have this money and those are in a higher need or higher priority, I would really like to kind of look at it like that and not just limit it to roads near schools.
Okay. And it was not intended just to be for roads near schools, but I wanted to make sure that they got some priority if they needed it. Mhm. So
Okay,
yes,
so the motion is to designate 100% of the funding to roads maintenance and to look first at roads that are near schools or school communities for a need, and secondly, if there's a greater need elsewhere, it would go there.
right.
Okay? That's the motion. I did second it, and I'll second the friendly amendment. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Only?
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Overshaw-Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, item number 4B, Coroner's Office, Professional Pathology Services, Administrator Brown.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, I believe we do have the coroner present on the line, but I would just say that this item is a continuation of using services for autopsies, and the coroner is asking to continue to utilize the service provider, Professional Pathology Services, who the county has previously used. And this is for autopsy services to be performed.
Chair, I move for approval.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second, discussion. I've got, at least one question here, and on page 22 of our agenda, it says that the county attorney's office does not have any objections, and it's recommended that the contents of the letter be memorialized into a formal contract, and procurement is drafting a contract to be reviewed. Can we have that possibly in our agenda packet when this comes to the full council, do you think, Administrator Brown?
I'm not 100% sure. We can see if we can get that done by that timeline. Certainly Pathology Services, we've used it before, so certainly we can ask them to get that done by, well, that would be by Wednesday, which is tomorrow. So I'm going to say, unfortunately, probably no.
Okay, yeah, Attorney McLean?
It should be super simple. If Jennifer's working on it, even if she isn't, I'm pretty sure we could knock that out in about an hour if there's something you need in a hurry. I can make that happen.
Well, I don't know when this contract, I don't recall when the contract expires. It was in here.
I believe it was in
We've got July 1st, 2021, so are we working without a contract at this point?
May I speak?
I believe Thunder is on the line. If you,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, if you want to allow her to address that. Are you recognize the coroner, Mr. Malinowski?
Yeah, I recognize,
Oh.
the coroner. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair Malinowski. So the Professional Pathology Services has been in place since, for over 10 years for the coroner's office. I don't know of any formal contract. We have not been able to locate a formal contract that was ever signed between the county and and that group. They simply had a letter like what we presented to you. And that's what they've been working on. If there is a contract that is to be put in place, I would just like to ask that that we at least get to see it so that we can make sure that it has all of the terms that we need in it. Is that okay?
That is fine. I would like for everybody involved to make sure that they're on board with any contract that does come about. So Administrator Brown, if we take, when we take this vote, and if the motion is for approval, I would hope that, when this comes to council, that all the necessary actions would be taken, not that we get it there and then have to defer it. If it's not ready for next Tuesday, I kind of think we ought to just hold it till it is ready. Okay, having said that, is there any other discussion?
Yes, was that legal that said, can we get a commitment on when that will be ready?
I can commit to tomorrow, but I will have to then run that by the coroner, so, but I can commit to having it done for my office.
Awesome, thank you.
We'll be ready and waiting.
Okay, thank you, Coroner Rutherford. Hearing no additional discussion, Ms. Only?
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item number 4D, the Public Defender Lease Agreement on pages 42 through 50 of our agenda.
Chair, I think you may have, I think it's,
Wait a minute, hold on, let's see if the
4C.
administrator has anything to add.
No.
Did I skip one?
C.
Well, we can do
C,
C
bro.
if you want to. Just seeing if you folks are paying attention. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Overture Walker and Mr. Livingston. Well, let's do C then, the Waverly Magistrate Lease Extension.
Yes, sir. We actually have Chief Magistrate Scott here, but I would say that this is a request to continue a lease of this property. And with that being said, the recommendation is for the renewal of the lease. But the judge is here if you would like to have the judge speak.
Okay. Anyone have any questions for the judge?
Motion to
Questions?
approve?
Second.
You wanted to address the questions, or you want to approve a motion?
Oh, yeah, that's fine. We got a motion in a second. Now, if you have questions, go ahead.
Did the motion? Yes. We've had this lease in place, I think, 20 years, Judge?
21, I believe.
21 years. And this is in my district. And another magistrate office was in my district when I first came on council. And the place was terrible, was unfit for anyone to provide services. I think I visited this magistrate office one time. Since in the 20 years, has there been any updates on it? What condition is it in? Because I'm really surprised at the conditions of our magistrate offices, our old magistrate offices.
And that's a good question, council member. This is actually, in my opinion, one of our better facilities, quite frankly. It is an older building, but it's well maintained. I don't think they've gone up on rent for 12 years. They are increasing rent $120 a month in this proposed new contract. I've been there several times. Compared to Dutch Fork is the Taj Mahal. Compared to Waverly, Lightsland, I mean, we got a lot that are a lot worse than. That are a lot worse, not Waverly, Pontiac. Pontiac's one of our really bad ones. Pontiac and Lightsland. Waverly, I've had no complaints from the judge. I've had no complaints from the staff there. I've had no complaints from the public about the condition of the building. There have been some issues. It's a two-story building. Mm-hmm. There's tenants on top of the judge's office. Apparently they had 2 months ago maybe, they had a leak in the bathroom area. Some water came down. It messed up some ceiling tiles, made them sag, made them fall. It didn't do any major damage in the magistrate's office. More recently, about 3 weeks ago, there was a fire in the public bathroom. We have no idea whether it was intentionally set, but it was explained to me that it was an electrical fire. That required, the bathroom got a whole remodel out of that, and the landlord paid for that. Quite frankly, with the exception of the new buildings, this is one of our better ones, in my opinion.
All right, thank you. So this is not on the list for a replacement or renovation, and I will stop by before it gets too full council to review it?
It is not.
Okay.
And, yeah, I mean, I would, you're welcome to, obviously, you're welcome to stop by there anytime, and I'm sure Judge Sutton will be happy to see you.
Okay, thank you. So, the last thing, Mr. Malinowski, is that, so we've been paying about $38,000 for a year for about 20 years, so that's $768,000 that we put into rent. And I know that we're looking at actually building some of the facilities ourselves. So that's something to just think about. And I know that there are other priorities that we're working on with you for replacing magistrate offices.
Yes, ma'am.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? The only thing I'd like to see is on page 33 of our agenda, which is page 4 of the lease, that we make these folks aware that there is no longer a Milton Pope at Richland County, and maybe we need to have that attention county administrator.
Page 33, what paragraph?
It's page 4 of the lease, page 33 of our agenda, the 4th paragraph down, under number 19, notices. Toward the very end of the 3rd line.
That needs to be amended to the correct information.
As I say, I think sometimes generically just county administrator could be better.
All right, we'll take care of that.
Okay. Hearing no other discussion, Ms. Only?
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Mr. Walker, you were wondering how we'd get through this quickly. I figured if I skip a couple, we'd do it. But all right, item D, the public defender lease agreement, pages 42 through 50.
Yeah, I move for approval.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any discussion? I would just like to state Administrator Brown on page 50 of the agenda that this lease extension agreement is made this 20th day of 2021. Might want to put a month in there. And also the commencing date, please, by the time it gets to the full council. If there's no additional discussion, Ms. Only?
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item number 4E, the public defender positions, they're on pages 51 through 61.
Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I move for approval, and I'm so glad to see that we've been fighting to get more positions for the public defender's office for a long time. And this will be a great asset to helping those who can't afford legal services.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. The question I have is on page 52 at the end of the first paragraph. It says the total increase in our contribution. We were told in the write-up that this money is being provided by the state, but now over here we're saying the total increase in our contribution is a specific amount, which is $225,000. Could you explain that, Administrator, please?
Let me see.
What page are you referring to, Mr. Malinowski?
Page 52 of the agenda, toward the very bottom of that first paragraph, at the end of the line 3 up from the bottom, the total increase in our contribution to the Special Revenue Fund would thus come to $1,825,000 rather than $1,600,000. Yet earlier on, we were told that funding for the positions has been granted by the state legislature and is recurring. So if the funding is granted by them, what do they mean by our contribution is increasing by almost $250,000?
I can try to get clarification on that.
Chair Malinowski, may I be recognized?
Oh, there you go. You got
Wait a
Budget
minute,
Director
go ahead,
James
Ms. Rutherford. Wait, no, is that who it is?
James Hayes, Budget Director.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Malinowski.
Mr. Hayes, go ahead.
What Public Defender Pringle was referring to, currently the state provides $1.6 million. So the hour was talking about the state's portion would go up by $225,000, $75,000 per position for 3 positions. So that amount would go from $1.6 million to $1,825,000. So she was responding to a question that I had. So the hour she was talking about was from the state standpoint.
Okay, so the state is paying for all of it.
That is correct, sir.
Thank you, Director Hayes. Okay, if there's no further discussion, Ms. Only?
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Overton Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next is item 4F, General Obligation Bond Ordinance for the Public Safety Complex, pages 62 through 85. Administrator Brown?
Yes, sir. This is the actual bond obligation that we're asking to be approved. This is the amount that we're asking to actually have council approve for the public safety complex. Previously, as you see in the packet, we asked you to allow us to have what we called a reimbursement resolution, but this is the actual bond that will be going out for the public safety complex. And we're asking that amount to not exceed $40 million as a part of that. So we're asking for approval for this item.
Chair,
McBride?
I move for approval in as much as we've discussed this issue before. And it's
Second.
needed.
Got a motion and a second. Questions or comments? Administrator Brown on page 66 of our agenda. The fourth line down, the first word says equipping. It says we're authorizing $40 million for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, equipping. Now, certainly some of these agencies that are moving in here have equipment that is still suitable for use. Are we referring to we're going to replace everybody's equipment with
No, sir, that's not what that's referring to.
Okay.
That's not the type of equipping. It's not talking about providing
Equipment.
capital resources for other agencies.
Okay. That's all I had, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Hearing none, Ms. Only?
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Overton Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, we're now on 4G, the Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center Award of Fire and Security Control Maintenance Contract, pages 86 to 88.
Yes, sir, Mr. Manowski. If you look at the recommendation, staff recommends the approval of the award of the fire and safety control maintenance contract to Honeywell in the amount of $362,947. The scope includes all services and equipment to be covered in the maintenance contract. This is a one-year contract with up to 4-year renewals based on satisfactory services to Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center, and we recommend approval.
And the legal department has the contract or has reviewed the contract?
I don't think I've seen the contract at this point. My approval was just for the concept of awarding the contract. I don't think typically that would come through procurement and then to legal.
Okay, so this will be a one reading again, I believe, so Administrator Brown, if you make sure that that's been handled
Yes, sir.
by legal, okay?
We
And
can.
my other question was that since this is a one-year contract with up to 4 renewals, are those renewals going to be at the same price?
All of that will be contingent upon our satisfaction. So if when we get to the end of that, we'll have to see if there's any request that we have or any request that the contractor has.
And I guess that could be addressed in the contract as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McBride?
If I remember correctly, is this the sole source, like a sole, only one vendor?
One vendor responded to the RFP, but it's not a sole source. It was only one vendor that responded.
Not a sole source, but it's like a sole source. Okay.
Any other comments? Hearing none, Ms. Only?
Need a motion?
I moved,
Thank you.
I moved to pass.
Move to approve, was that you, Mr. Overture Walker? Seconded, or no?
I moved,
You moved to approve
and
Do we have
Walker
it?
second.
to,
I moved to approve the, contract for the water, fire, and security control maintenance.
right, and do we have it, is there a second?
Second.
Got a second. I'll vote yes on this, but when it winds up on the consent, let's make sure that contract's been reviewed.
Understood.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Holman?
Malinowski?
Yes.
McBride?
Yes.
Overture Walker?
Yes.
Mackey?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item 4H, business license ordinance amendment to comply with SC Act 176.
Yes, sir, Mr. Malinowski. We do have, Business Service Center Director here, but I would simply say that this is a compliance issue. As you just mentioned, SC Act 176 has some business license standardization requirements in it, and we are recommending that the county be in compliance with those standardization requirements.
Basically, it's an unfunded state order, correct?
It is at SC Act 176, and we are recommending approval to be in compliance with the act.
Thank you, sir. That's a very politically correct way to state it. Any comments?
Chair,
Do you have a motion? Yes.
So move.
Got a motion?
Second.
And a second. I only have one question. It's on page 95 of our agenda. The second section that's been yellow highlighted where it says the county may, upon finding of a rational basis, as explained in the ordinance, actually vote to provide additional reasonable subclassifications. Is there anything that you see that we may be doing there at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Zach Kavanaugh, Business Service Center. So essentially what the rate class 9 is for is to place businesses that put an undue burden on county resources into to kind of recoup some of the money that we have to provide to them for them to operate legally. And that would be up to committee and council discretion.
Okay, but it doesn't come to us that, hey, we think you ought to do this. I mean, you'll be watching that as you move along.
Right. And as of right now, I don't have any business types that fall into that category.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Kavanaugh. Anything else? I got a motion
Mr.
in a
Chair.
second.
Mr.
No, yes.
Yes. I know we state that there is not any financial cost, but is there any additional training that staff has to go through to now comply with this system, or anything different that we have to change to put this in action?
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be a handful of changes that I will need to make, and also provide our team with some training to implement this new state law. One of the major changes is the license year is going to change. So currently our business licenses expire on December 31st. They will now expire on April 30th. So that'll essentially extend the renewal season for us, which I perceive as a good thing. We're always usually backlogged in the springtime, processing over 10,000 business licenses. So it'll give staff a little bit more time to process some renewals, and also it'll just extend the license year for the business community themselves, give them a little bit more time to get the renewals in our office as well. So there will be no financial impact for the county, but there will be financial impact for businesses themselves. I'm going to have to recalculate some rate schedules to comply with the new state mandated rate classes. And there'll certainly be some winners and losers in that group. Some business types, their rates are going to go up, some of them are going to go down, but the county as a whole won't see any effect in a whole revenue sense. But yeah, so we've already sent some staff to some roundtable meetings at the Municipal Association. Myself, I've attended a handful of them. We have a conference I'm sending a few of our team members to next month, which this is a hot topic in the business license community throughout the entire state.
And have we internally developed a kind of communication rollout plan to make sure that businesses are fully aware of this and that they know what the new, I guess, process will be?
Absolutely, yeah. So I will send out a mass email to all the business owners as soon as this ordinance is passed, and that will hopefully be in mid-November. And then I'll get with the PIO office and send out some press releases as well. So they'll be, and I'll also include that on the renewal application I mail out every year. So they'll certainly have plenty of chances to know about this change.
I would, Mr. Chair, if possible, I just would like to request maybe an update once this actually goes live, to kind of fall back and let us know how it's been and what you've heard, if there's been any other hiccups, any outcry from the business community, or any other items that we may need to fix internally.
Absolutely, no problem.
Administrator Brown, can you set some type of a timeline in there you think may be appropriate that shows how this is working out so we can get that update?
We can put it's not a sunset, but I can put in a calendar that will pop up and tell us to come back to council, to the committee, and communicate what has happened. And right now, we're going to be looking sometime after April 30th, but yes, we can do that, Mr. Chair.
Get Ms. Mackey's concerns addressed.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I would just like to mention that this, to comply with South Carolina Act 176, we will need this passed by the end of the calendar year. So there is a little bit of time frame on that.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, thank you, Director Kavanaugh. Ms. Only, if you'll call for the vote.
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride. Yes. Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes?
Motion passes.
Item number 4I, Neighborhood Matching Grant Guidelines.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. We have Brian Crooks here, but I would turn your attention to page, I believe it's 109, and you will see under the strategic and generative discussion, a summary of the changes that staff is recommending that council approve or the committee approve tonight. Now, namely, the name of the grant, or the new name would be the Neighborhood Enrichment Grant. Also, this would remove required math components associated with these funds. It will also increase the number of eligible projects associated with this funding, and also it would add a new funding level for low-income communities. And so with that being said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Crooks. If you have questions about the approval of this item and what that would mean for those entities who normally receive funding from these funds.
So, any questions?
Oh, okay, I thought you were going to give us something else there. All right. Any motion first? If not, let's go to some discussion then. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll move to approve the recommended changes.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. Now discussion. Go ahead.
First of all, I'm glad to see some of the recommended changes, like removing the required match component, because I've been talking about that for years, and increased eligible projects. But I would like for us to consider, and maybe when we get to the council, we may want to look at it. There are some of the grantees, communities apply each year over and over, and I think that's good, because what we want to do is get as many communities involved as possible. But there are still communities out there who never apply and who don't know how to write grant applications. And there are some districts that have more communities receiving grants than others. And I would like to look at some way to ensure that all districts are able to have at least some grants going into their community. And maybe that's another discussion.
Yes, ma'am. So one thing I would note is we do hold grant trainings every year. So we usually hold 4 to 8, and we also provide the opportunity for one-on-one meetings. So if there's any group that is interested in applying, we will more than happy sit down with that organization, walk them through the process, go step by step with the application to make sure that they have everything that they need, that they meet all the requirements, and then also that whatever they're proposing would still be an eligible project. So we do offer that service every year as part of that application.
I realize that those services are offered, but sometimes those communities, we can't reach them, but I do like the one-on-one. So thank you.
Ratio.
Thank you. For those trainings, I'm just wondering, and I'm sure you don't have numbers, but just maybe anecdotally, did you see an increase during, I'm sure these were offered by Zoom this past year. Do you feel like there was an increased accessibility to people if they were offered online, or do you feel like maybe it was a decrease?
I think this year was a little bit of a decrease. So because it was Zoom, I think we did record that session, so we didn't offer as many, but we offered more one-on-one appointment opportunities. So that was using that kind of scheduler process that we had through the county. I think just anecdotally, we probably had fewer submissions this year than we have in the last several years since I've been with the county. I think probably 2 years ago, so the year before the pandemic, we probably had some of the most and probably the best participation with some of those, even information meetings also. But this most recent year, due to COVID, we did that Zoom and we did one-on-ones. I'd say probably lesser attended than it had been in the past. But I think even in the Zoom meeting itself, we had about 18 attendees. And then I think just off the top of my head, we probably had 10 or 15 people that did one-on-one appointments, whether it was through the scheduler or just setting up through email with a team.
Thank you. I was just curious as to see if, you had different people, newer people, or anything like that.
A little bit of both. We had some new folks participate in the Zoom. We had some new folks participate one-on-one, but a lot of it's people that have been doing this. They just want to, get some clarification, continue with that process. But we do see a lot of new folks every year as part of this process. Yes, ma'am.
My question, Mr. Crooks, is in the one area you indicate that with new scoring criteria and reduction of the matching grants, that there's the hope for greater community involvement. It seems to me you would have the greater community involvement if you keep the match that consists of the actual volunteer time that used to count, because now you've got to have community members come in to help volunteer to get this. And it's no money, it's a volunteer time. Here's where you can get a lot of your youth involved, hopefully. And that was just my thought. Ms. McBride?
Yeah, it actually, Mr. Malinowski, it works the opposite. Because when you have these communities, the constituents, the community people, they volunteer to work. But if you got to sit down and write that grant, and you have to find out match times and hours, and it's only for $1,500, it just takes away. It's time consuming, and oftentimes it is, because I work with the communities, the ones that are writing the grants. It's time consuming, and even the federal grants, many have removed that match because this is volunteer match. It's just another means of extra work.
I wasn't referring to writing the grant. I was just referring to, as Mr. Crooks is revising this, that all you got to do as a community is say, all right, you're getting $1,500, you need, what would it be, 15 hours in community service? So, hey, as you get your 15 hours, just call it in and report it to us. It doesn't seem like that's a whole lot of heavy lifting.
That's time consuming for $1,500, and these people volunteering to work. It's really a lot of unnecessary paperwork, and you're not going to get any more volunteers by doing it. You might get less people applying.
So just to kind of address both of those points, it does a little bit of both. So we still are going to be asking for people to volunteer. They're still going to be having to do something. It's not going to be required of them. So one of the things that we kind of identified with this grant is the match in a lot of instances is that bigger barrier, as Ms. McBride talked about. So it's not just for just the application process itself, but also how does that match work? What exactly does that match does? And there's a lot of confusion around that because, we the way that has worked in the past is it's $10 per hour per that match. So if you've got a grant request of $1,500, you got to have 150 volunteer hours. And so that's where that match is coming from. But a lot of people think, well, that means I can do a $3,000 project. Well, no, you can't, because you're only getting $1,500 from the county. You've got to come up with that otherwise. And so they're expecting us to basically double paying as part of that match. And so it just leads to a lot of confusion in a bunch of different ways. But we still are going to be having, you're still going to have to be having that community involvement in a couple different ways, putting on the project, but also determining the project, and it has to be something that's going to be kind of community benefit overall. So it's kind of a little bit of both, but a lot of ways the match is kind of the biggest barrier with the grant at the moment.
Okay, and the last thing that I have on page 127, where it says neighborhood beautification, the projects, and it lists some of them there, could you please at some point in time provide me what the single asterisk and the double asterisk mean, because I didn't see them in looking through here.
Yes, sir. So
it'll be done later.
The single asterisk is plants cannot be more than 4 feet tall, and then the double asterisk would be a park must not be owned by City of Columbia.
Okay.
And that's going to be on that next page, Mr. Malinowski, 128, at the bottom of all of the bullet lists. So kind of in the middle area of that page on 128.
There it is. I missed it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else?
I hold it for committee. I hold it for council meeting.
Okay. All right, then, if you're holding that for council, we've got a motion and a second on this. If you call for the vote, please.
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Overshaw Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
And our last item for action, 4J, an ordinance amendment, Chapter 2, Administration, Purchase Negotiations, pages 141 to 143.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. If you turn your attention to page 142, basically what staff is asking to do is to allow this change to go through because it will remove the cap from 2 contracts being allowed for collection areas to 3 contracts. So it will change the cap that's currently in place, and that's what the amendment is. So that information is provided. This will be require 3 readings in a public hearing if approved, but staff is recommending to remove that cap and change it from 2 to 3 for high-performing service providers.
Okay. Discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I had a question.
Anyone? I'll move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. This is one of the easier ones tonight. I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Chair?
Ms. McBride? Okay, Ms. Mackey, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Administrator Brown, can you provide, I guess, any background as to how you decided that it went from 2 to 3 versus 2 to 4? What is the additional one?
Sure, and I'll ask the team to provide that. I think the idea behind it really was if you are already limiting it to 2, to ask for anything more, then that may give a less competition. So you could have a provider then have several areas, and then if you have any issues, then you have less diversity of service providers. So that could create issues for you in terms of, contract pricing, as well as service. If you have one provider who unfortunately wasn't doing a good job and they have 4 of your areas, versus 2 or 3. So it's that's the rhyme and reason to it, but there's no formula that says 2 versus 5.
Okay. Right.
I'm just not sure, I'm not understanding what you're saying in
Yes.
terms of expanding or reducing it. I'm not following you.
Absolutely. So let me try to make it very clear. We have providers performing a service, and right now, those providers are limited to no more than 2 contracts. But what we want to be able to do is say, if there is a provider who is doing a good job, then we don't want to limit them to just 2 contracts. We want them to be able to have as many as 3 contracts.
That's what I thought you were saying. To me, that reduces the diversity in the program, because after a while, you would have those ones that are doing well monopolizing more of the areas, and it prevents others from coming in the way I'm just looking at it generally. And I'm wondering why we put that in place in the beginning. I don't know whether Mr. Livingston has any background information on it or not.
Yes, in the past, I can remember at one point in time, we had 2 collectors. And one of them ended up in financial trouble and went out of business. So what had happened was we had to figure out a way to try to cover all these different homes, and so we weren't able to do that. So so the option was to go to several districts and limit them to 2 areas. So that way it gives you more flexibility if something happened with one collector versus the other one, and you can manage that and control it a little bit better, and also give you a great opportunity for diversity at that given time too. But I think now moving to 3 doesn't mean that you're going to give someone 3, but I think it'll give the staff a little bit more flexibility. But that's not to guarantee that someone can get 3.
That's correct. And you also have, these are also contracts, so those time periods are set, other than if they were doing so poorly, you decided to get out of those contracts. But I think the idea also is that, I hate to use the current example, but I think all of you have gotten a large number of calls related to service in certain areas. Well, there are some areas who are not getting that large volume of calls because they have providers who are able to meet the task and who could possibly take on more, but they are limited from doing that because we have a cap on service providers and what they can do. So in essence, you're doing the opposite of what you want to do. You're currently rewarding the behavior that you don't want to reward, and you're punishing the behavior that you do want to reward based on our current setup.
Those is not doing well.
Well, yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I shouldn't interrupt you. But I would just say that the child that Mr. Livingston has brought up is, at some point, with those providers, you have to be able to then have somebody to fill in for them, and that can become a big deal. And so we're trying to format it where we can control it rather than have it be something that we get overtaken by, which is kind of what we're experiencing right now.
The bulk items on page 142, the basic service for weekly curbside collection, is that different, Mr. Brown?
No, bulk items right now are currently by appointment.
They are already by appointment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I just have some issues with making sure that in addition to being by appointment, that there is a regular check to see that items are not placed outside, because that's one of the issues that I'm seeing, that they're not calling for them. Some of them are senior citizens, they don't know where to call, others don't know where to call, but the items are left outside unattended, not picked up.
Yes, ma'am, we could consider that and figure out how we can make that possible and what kind of costs associated with that, but we can certainly consider that, Ms. McBride.
In that vein, Administrator Brown, possibly in the contracts that we write with these haulers, it could be put in there that if they observe a bulk item along the road, that they actually report it to the county where they saw it. That way, if it's something that hasn't been called in, we get some kind of report on it so it can be picked up.
We can certainly see if they'll be willing to do that, Mr. Malinowski.
Just a suggestion. Thank you. Mr. Ratio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this kind of harkens back a little bit to our item in D&S around landlord ordinances. And one of the key issues that we're dealing with is that, we have a landlord, there's a turnover of the apartment or the building from tenant to tenant, maybe at the end of a 9-month period, perhaps. And there are just items kind of left out. Oh, hi. And there are items left out. No one calls for them. I would love to see there being some kind of communication between Public Works when these things are, noticed, or they have to go out without being called, and have some feedback that goes into, I guess, business licensing or something like that. How can we track bulk items that are left out and have not had an appointment, and yet our Public Works still has to go deal with it? Can we have a communication with, I guess it would be business license in that instance? That's just something that I wanted to make sure that I verbalized when we're talking about bulk items being picked up or not being picked up.
I would add that in your landlord ordinance, it's something like that be placed into it, that landlords are required to call if they see a lot of trash thrown out by someone that left an apartment building, and that if they don't, that they could possibly be fined for not calling it in.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I have a question regarding the curbside collection service. So we state, what is this, page 142, we're going to start advertising later this year. So are we advertising in 2 service areas or 3?
So I can have Mr. Maloney clarify that for you, just so you can be clear on that.
That's a typo, it's 3.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional discussion? Hearing none, we do have a motion and a second on this item. Ms. Only?
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
I'm going to say no, so
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, and the last item on the agenda is item pending analysis, no action required. In summation, it's for the county to direct the administrator to conduct an equity and inclusive assessment of county administrative policies and services and provide recommendations that will advance certain items in that area. It says that staff does not have an update for this item. Administrator Brown, is there any idea when another update will be provided?
Yes, sir. So, 2 things, Mr. Malinowski. I did meet with, and she certainly can speak to this, Ms. McBride, who's the maker of the motion. I would just point that the item that you have listed there is really not the full motion. But we have had some meetings subsequent to this, and we are working to get more information, but I'll let Ms. McBride speak to this. Go ahead, Ms. McBride, I'll stop.
I provided each council member with the full motion, so you all have that. I do know, I was just reading the rules, and after a while, I think we've gone beyond the 100 days. Mr. Malinowski.
Yeah, we don't have a date here, so I can't answer that, but.
Well, it's been in February, we've gone beyond the 100 days,
did.
and it's not gonna be, we'll have to start over. But hopefully, I'm looking forward to, Mr. Brown and his staff moving forward with it, before the end of the year, at least a definition in terms of where we're going, the contract. And I've asked them to look at an external contractor. So I'm being nice tonight. So, I'm looking forward to having something done.
Thank you for that warning, so you all know what's gonna happen the next night from Ms. McBride. All right, if there's
Motion to adjourn?
nothing further, I've got a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And a second. Ms. Only?
Malinowski.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Overture Walker.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone.